Sup guys? Recently Chapter 15 was announced for release in the near future, so I decided to see how hard we can roll Chapter 14 now with all the new stuff that we've got since its release. By rolling it, this time around I don't mean a fleet that doesn't really take any damage, but rather stacking really high DPS ships and seeing how fast I can kill every node. This kind of setup probably won't be realistic for 99% of players, but I'll still give you some tips that you might be able to apply to your own fleet ideas. Right off the bat, I am just going to say that this isn't the best or most optimal and fine-tuned fleet, just something that I came up with on the spot. I wanted to see if I could get by without a healer, so one very obvious way to improve the overall performance of the fleet significantly would be to replace Independence with Unicorn. Getting into the breakdown of the fleet, I pretty much just maximized damage wherever possible. My logic was that if I could kill the enemies fast enough, there won't be much damage coming back in my direction. As for my flagship, I opted to go for Musashi over Bismarck Zwei. Although Zwei has a strong niche in the out-of-ammo fights, I felt that my fleet probably dealt enough damage without her, and the extra protection that Musashi gives my main fleet, as well as her better damage against heavy, would be more useful. You can't really go wrong with either one though. In the off-flag, I chose to go with Independence and FDG, because both of them have very low cooldowns and a high amount of AoE. Some other options you could potentially play around with are, once again, Bismarck Zwei, Saratoga, Shinano, Odin, and of course, Unicorn as well as any other healer. For the equipment, the Purple Twin 410 is the only relatively fast gun Musashi can use that actually deals significant damage itself. Since I'm using the high-performance fire control radar on Musashi, I'm using shells with a 457mm on FDG for a bit of desync, although not much. As for Independence, I gave her the planes with the most AoE, while also helping to shoot down incoming planes. As for the Vanguard, I went with 3 of the highest DPS ships. Both Plymouth and Unzen are capable of tanking, but you'll have to give whichever one is tanking defensive auxiliaries. Since Unzen scales better with damage auxiliaries, I used Plymouth as my tank. And that's pretty much it for the mob fleet. Let's now take a look at it in action. As we get into the first battle, notice how even though we don't have any preloads in the main fleet, as opposed to commonly having either Unicorn or Perseus, the preloaded torpedoes wipe the first wave of enemies. So, here's a quick tip: if you have strong preloaded torpedoes, then stacking main fleet preloads on top is kind of unnecessary. Now, we can see that the main fleet is ready to fire. You might notice that the cooldowns are relatively close to each other, especially between Independence and Musashi. Normally, this would lead to some unwanted downtime for the next 10 to 15 seconds or so while your main fleet damage is all on cooldown at the same time, which might allow enemies to stay alive for long enough to deal some serious damage to your fleet. But in this case, it actually ends up being fine because as soon as the main fleet is finished firing, Unzen and Shimakaze's torpedoes are ready to go. This is the advantage of using strong torpedo vanguards over guns in general. If the torpedoes deal enough damage, they can pretty much one-shot enemies the same way an airstrike or battleship salvo would, and by pretty much disposing of them immediately, they do not have a chance to fire back. This means that if you have very strong torpedoes in your vanguard, you get a lot more options in terms of maintaining high damage uptime. As you can see, because the torpedoes wiped out pretty much all enemies except one, there's nothing threatening your fleet until the next time your main fleet cooldowns are ready to go, which ends the node. From here on out, I'm just going to skip to the result screen of each fight and show how much HP is lost from one fight to the next. If you want to see the full unedited clear, you can find the raw footage in the description. The same thing that happened in the first node is going to repeat pretty much every single node, resulting in next to no damage taken by the main fleet despite the complete absence of healing. On the other hand, because 2 of the Vanguard ships we're using are not particularly tanky and using no defensive equipment at all, the little bits of chip damage they receive will start to add up as the fights go on. This illustrates the point that Vanguard healing is much more valuable than main fleet healing, and sacrificing damage for main fleet healing would just be counterproductive to keeping your main fleet safe. By the end of the run, I realized that Unicorn would probably not only be more consistent for the clear, but likely also better for clear times, as her airstrike cooldown would not be directly matched with Musashi's main con cooldown the way Independence is doing, and her reload command buff actually has a noticeable reduction for the Vanguard's torpedo cooldowns. As for the boss fleet, I chose to use UVH for her cross-fleet barrage, then I wanted 2 carriers to reach air supremacy. I used the beacon on Shinano and the opposite beacon thing that slows down your airstrikes on Haku, so that they would desync. Their loadouts are solely focused on AoEs. In the Vanguard, I just stacked more strong torpedo ships, leading to a pretty decent clear time of the boss node, despite not using particularly the most overpowered individual ships. And that's pretty much going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching, and see you in the next one.